Dr. Emma Lloyd is a rising local radio host who gives love advice to her listeners. In her show, Real Love, Emma listens to her callers as they pour out their concerns about their relationship and ask her how to find the love they want. Emma easily and confidently dissects their problems and goes straight to the point by telling them what they need to do. She has a book titled Real Love, which is about to be launched in a few days. It's a self-help book about love that she compiled using several researches. Most of her listeners are women, though men occasionally tune in as well. Whenever she is asked about how to find real love, she gives her listeners the acronym REAL, which stands for 4 questions. Is he responsible? Are they equal? Is he an adult? Is he a loving person? Emma is happy to know that she has helped a lot through her book and radio show, because this means she is right about her own perception of love. But one call will have her life turned upside down. One of Emma's many listeners is Sophia. She listens to the show while watching her fiancé, Patrick, play football with his friends. Patrick is totally in love with her and is happy to see her watching him play his favorite game. But Sophia doesn't feel the same as she continues to digest Emma's words and realizes she needs help. So that night while driving home, she calls the radio station to seek advice from the love guru. After a moment of hesitation, she spills out her doubts about her relationship with Patrick. Sophia says she's about to get married that weekend, but she's having second thoughts. Although Emma doesn't suggest anything concrete, she inadvertently worsens Sophia's hesitation. Upon probing, Emma finds out that Sophia has only known her fiancé for 5 months, and that she has taken Emma's online compatibility test, which scored low. Emma tells her it's only right to consider this marriage very carefully, as 43% of marriages end in divorce. The worst thing, other than being alone, is being alone with the wrong person. Sophia takes this as advice to call off the wedding. What she doesn't know is that around the same time, Patrick and his friends have chosen to listen to the radio and hear Sophia's segment. Patrick is devastated to find out that the love of his life is having doubts about their future together. The next day, Emma wakes up to the smell of coffee and the cuddling of her fiancé, Richard Braxton, who also happens to be her publisher. He is very excited about the upcoming launch of her book. He's proud of Emma as he flaunts the magazine where she is featured as the new sensational love guru. While they are celebrating and having a sweet moment, miles away, someone is very upset and pissed about his love life. Patrick is riding the fire truck with his workmates. He's been ranting about Sophia breaking up with him, and how it's this Emma's fault that his life is in shambles. As they turn around the street, they see Sophia walking. Patrick asks the driver to stop the truck in front of the store where Sophia entered. Everyone is confused about why firemen are making a scene there, while Sophia tries to hide from Patrick. Eventually, she faces him. He asks her for an acceptable reason why she's calling off the wedding. Unfortunately, Sophia just reiterates she doesn't want to get married to him anymore. Poor Patrick spends the whole day heartbroken, while Emma continues with her work, unaware of what has happened. Little does she know, that night her life will change. Patrick visits his neighbor Ajay that night. Ajay is an amateur hacker and has heard about what happened to Patrick. In solidarity with Patrick's misfortune in love, Ajay shows the latter what he has created. It's an online marriage certificate with Dr. Emma Lloyd's name on it, and Patrick's name as the husband. He's only intending it as a prank, and Patrick is unsure whether to proceed with this. But he wants to teach this so-called love guru a lesson, so he gives Ajay the thumbs up. In one click, Ajay finishes filing the certificate onto the online records of the New York registry. A few days later, Emma and Richard visit the registry office to get an application for a marriage license. To both's utter surprise, they find out Emma is already married. With an unconcerned expression, the clerk explains that Emma's marital status is recognized by the state. Then he gives them a thick stack of annulment papers that must be signed by both Emma and her unknown husband, named Patrick Sullivan. The couple is rattled by this unexpected dilemma. How in the world did Emma get married? Where will they find this Patrick Sullivan? For Richard, this is not the only problem. His publishing company needs to recall thousands of books because of its sham author. Because of this, his company is in danger of getting liquidated by Ball & Becker, another company. His only saving grace is launching Emma's book, and his marriage to her. If the public finds out that the love guru is a polygamist, no matter how untrue it is, then his life will be over. Richard keeps on ranting and worrying, and he pulls out a chocolate bar to stress eat. Emma is calmer, though. There are still 2 weeks left before their wedding, enough time to find her accidental husband and annul their marriage. She decides to deal with this herself. She travels to Astoria in Queens, New York, where, according to the data in the certificate, Patrick Sullivan presumably is. She arrives at an Indian restaurant, but the waitress tells her to look for Patrick at the fire station. When she arrives at the station, a fireman directs her to a pub nearby. That's where she finds Patrick, playing billiards with a friend. Even though he's flustered and didn't expect Emma to come and find him, Patrick still greets her. Emma attempts to tell him her concerns about her situation, but Patrick keeps distracting her with the pool game and greetings from the pub for her upcoming marriage. He even points out that Emma shouldn't be hammered when her wedding is so close. However, she takes this as a challenge, and proudly says she doesn't get drunk. The trick is to recite the president's names in order. A few shots of liquor later, she's totally drunk. She eventually tells Patrick they are married due to some unknown computer glitch, and she wants him to sign the annulment papers she brought. But before she can give him the papers, she hits her head on the counter. Patrick catches her. She drunkenly tells him she likes firemen, before completely passing out. Patrick brings the unconscious Emma to his home. He feels obliged to take care of her. And he should, because he's the reason why the woman is in that drunken state. It seems like his original goal of teaching her a lesson has got out of hand. Her phone rings, and Patrick sees that her fiancé is calling. He chooses not to answer, to not complicate the situation. The next day, Emma wakes up with a bag of frozen food on her face and looks at an unfamiliar room. She abruptly gets up and panics about her situation. Last night is a blur, and she's unsure whether she's done something indecent. She sees a note on the door that says, "Thank you for last night," which heightens her confusion. She grabs her things and gets out of the apartment building to proceed to her office, not minding whether her hair is combed or her clothes fixed. Upon arriving at her office, her secretary informs her that Richard has called multiple times, and that Wilder, her father, is there. But Emma doesn't seem to hear, because she's more concerned about her emergency dress and taking an aspirin for her headache. The next scenes show how chaotic Emma's morning is, trying to answer 2 simultaneous phone calls from Richard and Patrick, while looking for that non-existent emergency dress, with Wilder and her secretary amused at her. When things have subsided, that's when Wilder gets her daughter's attention and tells her he's leaving. He's only there to deliver the wedding dress that used to belong to Emma's mother. Emma appreciates Wilder's efforts, but she cringes when he teases her about her 2 husbands. Emma receives another call from Patrick, and while she's confronting him about last night, her secretary reminds her that she's supposed to attend a cake tasting appointment. She immediately goes down to the lobby, where she unexpectedly finds Patrick, holding 2 cups of coffee and the stack of the annulment papers. He says he knows a nearby notary office where they can file the signed papers. Emma says she'll go there with him later because she has a prior appointment. She gets inside the car, and to her surprise, Patrick gets in as well. Patrick is shameless as he delightfully tries the free cake samples. He even asks for milk to pair with some of them. Emma is mortified as she notices the other guests looking at them. She's helpless as he feeds her the cake combo he likes. To her surprise, she likes it too. Then he asks the guest who has been looking at them, a poised middle-aged woman, where they are from, to which the lady says they're from Germany. Patrick suddenly gets up and asks them to try the cake. Then he calls the server and tells her to give everyone in the room cakes and milk. He even goes inside the kitchen. The middle-aged woman comments that Emma's fiancé is quite a handful. Emma is so embarrassed and annoyed that she just goes along with everyone's impression that Patrick is her fiancé. The woman says he's impulsive and unpredictable, and Emma agrees that he's full of surprises. But the woman seems genuinely happy, as she says that's the fun in their relationship. She adds that Patrick reminds her of her husband when they first met, and that they still love each other and have fun even after 25 years. Patrick returns with the cakes. The woman asks them how they first met. Of course, Emma and Patrick can't tell the truth, so they think of a romantic story on the spot. This storytelling becomes an impromptu singing session, as everyone starts singing "Every Woman in the World," the alleged song during Patrick and Emma's meeting. After the chaotic cake tasting, Patrick brings Emma to the nearby notary office as promised. There, Patrick's other neighbor and friend Mr. Deep is the one handling the filing of documents. He checks the papers and sees them all properly signed. But he sees secret signals from Patrick to not give a definite answer of when he can approve the papers. Emma is in a rush because she needs to prepare for her book launching party later that evening. She's had enough, so she simply says she'll send a messenger to check again before leaving. When she's gone, Mr. Deep scolds Patrick for what he's doing. For him, Emma seems to be a really nice lady who's being very patient and civilized in handling her marital fiasco. That's why he pities her. Patrick feels guilty too. It's true that he initially wanted Emma to learn a lesson or 2 about marriage, but something in him has changed in the past 2 days. He admits she's starting to grow on him. Mr. Deep approves the annulment papers and, as he gives them back to Patrick, warns him not to grow attached to her. Emma is still a bit out of sorts when she arrives at her own party. Richard is already there, making sure everything is in order. She goes to her fiancé and tells him the papers are already being processed in the notary's office. Richard is pleased. He compliments Emma's look, before noticing the bruise on her forehead. Emma is worried about her appearance, so she goes to the restroom to cover it with some makeup. There, she meets again the lady from the cake tasting earlier. The lady tells her she's excited when she realizes it's Emma's book that's being launched. Upon reading it, she's surprised that a helpless romantic like Emma can give such practical advice about love and relationships. Clearly, the lady is thinking Emma is head over heels in love with the man whom she thinks is her fiancé. Emma feels awkward, but that's not the only surprise of the night. She finds out that the lady is Greta Ballenbecker, who is under the impression that Emma's fiancé also happens to own the company that her husband intends to liquidate. She likes Emma and the man whom she thinks is Richard, so she tells her that they should meet for dinner later. She believes that if her husband Carl meets the man she met at the cake tasting earlier, then his publishing company will be saved. Now, Greta wants to introduce Emma and Richard to her husband, so she gestures for Emma to come with her. Emma is in a tight spot. How in the small world can she clarify this misunderstanding? As she signs a book, Greta suddenly shouts Richard's name and points to someone in the crowd. Emma looks up, and she sees that Greta is pointing at Patrick, who is there to give her the papers. Emma immediately hugs Patrick and aggressively whispers in his ear to play along with her. As they follow Mrs. Ballenbecker to her husband, Emma explains the situation to him. Mrs. Ballenbecker thinks he is her fiancé and the owner of a publishing company. She asks him to play along just this time, until she can sort things out. Patrick is confused, but he follows Emma's request. They finally meet Carl Ballenbecker. He tries to intimidate Patrick, thinking he's Richard. But after a few seconds, Patrick's personable character wins Carl's approval. They easily discuss football, and Greta looks proud of Emma. It would have been a smooth sailing introduction, had it not been for the real Richard, who approaches them. His straightforward approach instantly changes Carl's mood. Good thing, Emma quickly introduces Richard as her brother, and Patrick plays along by greeting him. Not understanding the situation, Richards pulls Emma into the kitchen. There, Richard starts stress eating as he demands Emma to explain. Briefly, she tells him that Patrick is the man indicated as her husband in the marriage certificate. She adds that the Ballenbeckers are under the impression that he is Richard, who is her fiancé, and the owner of Abington Publishing. Patrick is doing a great job making a good impression on Carl, and if he attends the dinner later, then Richard's company will be saved from being liquidated. Richard weighs up the situation, and understands that he shouldn't make unnecessary mistakes. Therefore, he tells Emma to continue the charade with that man. However, Patrick has left the party. Emma tries to call him. She begs for him to come to the dinner, because her entire career and her love life are at stake. But Patrick doesn't show up until dessert, and for a good reason. He tells the Ballenbeckers and everyone at the table that he's attending another party with his family. And for him, family comes first. So he invites them all to the Upaneana. It's a sacred ceremony done before a man weds. This ceremony is for Ajay, and Patrick stands as one of his guardians while his guests quietly observe the proceedings. Afterward, they all have a blast enjoying the music, and the women chatting together as they get their henna tattoos. It seems that, for a few moments, Emma has forgotten her dilemmas as she dances with Patrick. She thanks him for showing up. She also tells him that he's not the person he thought he was. Patrick says he feels the same. He attempts to kiss her, but at the last minute Emma pulls back. She realizes this isn't right. She leaves the party and calls her father to fetch her. Patrick watches as she walks away. He knows that he's gone too far and in too deep with his feelings for Dr. Emma Lloyd. He muses about what he must do with his situation. Ajay advises him that girls like honesty, so he must tell the truth to Emma. Meanwhile, Emma is contemplating her past days with Patrick. For the first time, she has experienced spontaneity, something that has been missing in her well-structured life. She approaches life with practicality, so Patrick's presence is a novelty to her. She tells her father about the situation the next morning. Wilder says if her mom was there, she would have known the right things to tell her. Their conversation is interrupted by Wilder's stepdaughter. Emma loses her appetite and chooses to leave. It seems like she doesn't approve of her father's new relationship. Before she gets into her car, Wilder reminds her that she won't always be right. Emma refuses to listen. She's afraid that, with the way things are going in her life, her father may be right. Later that day, she meets with Richard to discuss paints. She can't focus, and eventually she tells him why. She has lost the annulment papers. Patrick indeed brought them during her book party. But between that, the dinner with the Ballenbeckers, and the Indian party, she lost track of them. Richard comforts her. He's in a chipper mood because Carl Ballenbecker has decided not to proceed with his company's liquidation. He tells Emma he'll take care of everything, so they can go back to the way they were. So Emma continues with her work at the radio station, giving love advice to her callers. Richard visits Patrick at the football field to ask for the papers. The latter says he'll be the one to bring it to the office. At that point, Richard makes a subtle warning. He doesn't buy the unknown computer glitch excuse for his fiancée's situation. Someone within Patrick's circle must be capable of causing this glitch. Richard reiterates that he and Emma have a life together that doesn't include Patrick, so he implores him to stop communicating with Emma. After this tense conversation, Patrick decides it's time to set things straight with Emma. First, he throws away all of the clippings about her, as well as leftover invitations from his supposed wedding to Sophia. He also grabs Emma's book and starts reading it as he makes his way to the radio station. When he arrives at the booth, he calls the station and poses as one of Emma's callers. He knocks on the glass wall as he points out something that many haven't noticed in the book. It says it's a self-help book, but Patrick can't find anything to help him find somebody to love, or get somebody to love him back. All it ever tells is what's wrong with the one he loves. And that's not exactly helpful. Emma is flustered at his presence. She tells him that perhaps he's the one that's wrong for the person, instead of the other way around. Her response inadvertently proves his point. He asks what it is that she knows about him to make her say that, which is exactly his issue with Emma and her love advice. But she simply ignores the question, and instead, she tells him to stop blaming other people for his problem and start looking into himself. She even throws an object onto the wall before ending the call. She has forgotten that she's on air, and her conversation has just been broadcasted for everyone to hear, including Richard. Fuming, she follows him to the elevator. He says he has a problem with what the book says about him, about being unsuitable to anyone who thinks the book is right, including her. Emma keeps her pride and says everything she's written in the book is all correct. Patrick decides to use his badge as a fireman. He orders everyone to vacate the elevator, leaving the two of them inside. He asks her if she still thinks he's unsuitable. Then, unable to hold their true feelings in, they have an intense makeout session inside the elevator. The guards enjoy their little spectacle before ordering them to get out. Patrick and Emma proceed to the rooftop, where they giggle at what just happened. It's clear that in the few days they've spent together, something has developed between them. But they need to face the reality that their marriage is a sham, and Emma is supposed to marry her fiancé. Patrick asks her if she loves Richard. As a husband, he wants to make sure that his wife is happy with another man. He has genuinely fallen for her. Emma only says she wants to be happy. That's when she realizes that she's not. For all the tips and tricks she has written to find happiness in a relationship, she herself can't find it on her own. Patrick doesn't force himself onto her any longer. He gives her the signed papers and wishes her luck in her life. That night, Emma meets Richard. She looks haggard, not her usual looks. She gives him the ruffled papers and declares that they only need to file them, and everything will be normal again. Richard is pleased. Then he brings out their finished wedding rings. Emma inspects hers, then gets upset because the jeweler had gotten hers wrong. Instead of inscribing, "I do," she reads it as "do I," but when Richard looks at it, the inscription is correct. That's when he understands that Emma may need some space due to the stress of the upcoming wedding. She's confused. He's not, and he knows what he wants. But he won't force the wedding if she's in that state of mind. So he gives her the space she needs so she can figure out what she wants. He takes the papers to take care of the filing. For the next few days, Emma continues to be confused about her feelings. She returns to her father to ask for some advice. To her surprise, she meets her stepmother, who happens to be the caterer of her wedding. There, she can see that her father is happy with the relationship, something that she refused to acknowledge before. She realizes Wilder deserves his happiness. At the table, she asks him what he thinks of Richard. Wilder says he's the type of man that seems like a safe bet, the type she advises her female listeners to look for. Emma agrees, and that's where her dilemma comes from. She used to be happy with Richard, until Patrick came along. She discovers that all her practical principles in love become useless when there's no spark in the relationship, and that's what she finds in Patrick. Not just the spark, but the freedom and understanding to be herself, without all the restrictions she has written in her book. That's why she's confused, because she's afraid to face reality. That it might be wrong to choose Richard, and that it may be right to love Patrick. Emma finally chooses to follow her feelings instead of logic. She visits Patrick one rainy night. In his room, they let go of their repressed feelings for each other. The next morning, Emma cooks breakfast for both of them while Patrick takes a shower. As she throws a used tissue paper, she sees an article about her inside the trash. Curious, she picks up all the papers and checks them. To her indignation, all of those papers are about her. News clippings and Google articles. The worst of all is the wedding invitation, naming Patrick and Sophia as the couple. Emma confronts Patrick while he's still in the shower. She's hurt to know that the man she has learned to love may have been stalking her all this time. That his sweetness and feelings for her may have a hidden agenda. She leaves his unit, and he follows. Finally, it's time for them to confront what started their situation. Emma figures out that it's Patrick who caused that glitch that changed her marital status. She initially thought he was single, but it turns out that he was to be married. She rants about how she trusted him, and that she almost called off her wedding, only to find his lies. Patrick clarifies the whole situation. Beckons her to look inside a wedding boutique, where a lady works as a receptionist. Patrick tells Emma that the lady's name is Sophia. He tells her their love story, and that they were supposed to get married. But Sophia was a big fan of Emma's show, and days before the wedding, she called her. Patrick is still hurt, as he accuses Emma of telling Sophia to call off the wedding. How can Emma say that to someone she doesn't know, and doesn't even remember as her caller, and still continues to tell the same thing to other listeners without realizing she has ruined 2 lives? Patrick tells her how devastated he was at that time. He wanted to educate Emma about how it feels like to have her life get ripped out from under her. And sadly, he did. Emma now suffers from his actions, and hers as well. The next few days are like a blur in Emma's life. All the things she tells her listeners are like the things she wants to convince herself are right. She returns to Richard, who accepts her again in his life. Preparations for their wedding continue, and it seems like Emma has gotten back to her old life. But she can't shake off that feeling of unsureness, that something is missing. One day, during her show, she receives a call from someone named Patrick of Astoria. Immediately, Emma knows who he is. She pretends that they're running out of airtime, so she rushes him to say what he wants to say. Patrick gets to the point. He says he's fallen for someone, but she's getting married tomorrow. If that's what she really wants, he's happy for her. But he wants to tell her that he loves her. When he looks at her, he can see his whole life in her eyes. He thinks she should know. Emma immediately hangs up and walks out of the booth, necessitating the manager to take over the rest of the calls. She knows that Patrick is talking about her, and she can't take it. The next day, all is set for Emma and Richard's wedding. Except for Emma, whose doubts about the wedding are much stronger than before. As her veil is put on, she thinks she can't do this anymore. As if on cue, Richard enters the room, holding a paper bag. As it happens, it contains the annulment papers for Emma and Patrick. It's not that Richard has forgotten to file them. Rather, he thinks it's not right to file them. Emma is sorry that this is happening, but she can't marry him when there's someone else on her mind. Richard is a gentleman. He knows when he's lost, and he knows that if they marry, Emma will continue looking over her shoulder instead of looking forward with him. Giving her the papers, he lets her go. Emma is grateful. Now all they need is how to explain their decision to everyone waiting for them at the church. Emma sees the sprinkler on the ceiling and gets an idea. Richard takes one last look at her before leaving. Patrick and his crew prepare as they receive an emergency call about a fire in a church. But he's curious about why they are specifically requested to respond at a location that's not part of their district. As it turns out, it's Emma who has requested them. She's finally ready to face Patrick and her future with him. Patrick has a big smile as he sees Emma looking lovely in her wedding dress. No words are needed, as they have grown up from their mistakes. They run and kiss each other for everyone to see. Then Emma rides on the fire truck with Patrick, her veil trailing behind them as if they have just gotten married. A year later, they are still very much in love with each other, and they are expecting the third member of their family soon.